Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM, and on the KIDO Talk Radio app. Joining us now is Martin Meyer. Good morning, sir.
Good morning, Kevin. How are you?
Not bad. Rather disturbing story that you have to share with us from the Christian Action Network concerning patrol cars that were very unique. Let's just call it that. That'll be my intro to your segment, sir.
Yes, so New York City now has what they call Muslim community patrol cars. Currently, there's 3 of them running around the Brooklyn area. By the end of summer, they hope to have a total of 7, with the goal of having 30 of these patrol cars in the near future. Right now, they're located in Brooklyn. They are patrolling the Bay Ridge area, having been basically kicked out of the Crown Heights area because some of the Muslims in that area do not want to see their cars, even in basically a Muslim-controlled area. Now, the point of these cars is to enforce Sharia law first on Muslims and then on non-Muslims. We have some paid undercover informants who have been infiltrating what is known as the Muslim Community Patrol and Services, which began last November, to find out exactly what their real mission is supposed to be. Now, to the media, they basically say that their goal is to protect the area mosques from Islamophobic attacks. But internally, they admit that their real goal is to get the Muslims first in the area to start abiding by Sharia law, and then after that to focus on non-Muslims.
Boy, whatever happened to the separation of church and state?
Well, that's an interesting question because the president of the Brooklyn Bureau has come out and said that he hopes that his city can help fund equipment for these cars and to help them purchase more cars. And, when he came out and said that publicly, I was wondering, if these were called Christian patrol cars, when the Bureau president came out and said he wanted to use tax dollars to buy more Christian patrol cars, do you think the ACLU would have spoken up by now and say, what's going on here? You actually are going to use tax dollars to fund a Christian police force in a city? So, as usual, there's a lot of hypocrisy going on here. And quite frankly, Kevin, there's a lot of fear of the Muslims in that particular area of New York, and not so much the fear that there's going to be some violent retribution against people who oppose it, but there's always the political correctness backlash that if a politician was to come out and criticize these cars or even criticize the Brooklyn Bureau president for saying he wants to use tax dollars to fund more of these cars, they're not willing to say anything. A bit of a self-censorship going on here. Maybe secretively they are opposed to the idea, but they don't want to come out and publicly say anything about these cars. But something needs to be said about these cars because the puppet head behind these cars is Imam Siraj Wahhaj. And I'm sure that's a name that's not very familiar with your listeners, but he has a lot of known terrorist links in his past. He has criticized America as being nothing more than a terrorist nation. He has predicted that one day America will crumble into ashes and will be replaced by Islam. His whole goal is to set up America as an Islamic country. And he has previously controlled Muslim security forces going all the way back to 1988, in which he had a Muslim force of about 40 to 50 of so-called security officers in Brooklyn that were running around and supposedly fighting drug dens and crack dealers and going to stores and forcing them to get alcohol out of the stores and enforcing Sharia law at that time. Now he's resurrected again as a puppet head for these cars, and his goal is to well, now we got police cars. We got police-looking cars. These cars look exactly like NYPD police cars. And I encourage your listeners that are interested to go to our website, and you will see that we have a 16-page special report called The Secret Agenda of Muslim Community Patrol Cars. And they can take a look at these cars. We have them pictured side by side with the NYPD police car and these Muslim control patrol cars, so people can see exactly how similar these patrol cars look. And the point of that is to intimidate not only the Muslims in the area, but visitors to New York City. If you actually look at this car, you're going to think that it is an official branch of the NYPD. These officers look like NYPD officers when they get out of the cars. These cars have sirens on it. They have lights in the dash on it. So if one of these officers was to come up to you and you're not familiar that it's not an official branch of the NYPD, you're probably going to think, well, I better pay attention to what this officer is telling me not to do because I don't want to go to jail. And so it's very intimidating to camouflage themselves as an official branch of the NYPD.
Martin Meyer joining us, Christian Action Network. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. If you could, Martin, could you repeat this just one more time, these Muslim patrol cars, and, you know, in this country that, you know, the media and the government, anytime you say you're a person of faith, you're a Christian, they come after you. And whether it's, you know, Detroit that's been turned into whatever you want to call it, again, no separation of church and state with all the mosques going up, you actually have patrol cars designed to look like New York City police patrol cars patrolling the Muslim and the outside the Muslim faith community.
Yeah, absolutely. So what happened was recently, earlier this year, is one of these patrol officers approached about 4 African-American young adults who were smoking pot outside of a mosque in Brooklyn. And that Muslim patrol officer tried to instruct these 4 African-Americans to stop smoking pot. Well, a rather loud argument ensued, and the Muslim patrol officer was accused of being a phony cop, and they told him that if he came back around again, they were going to shoot him. And that caused a rather large stir in the Brooklyn area. And 4 mosques got together to say, well, what are we going to do about these newly created Muslim community patrol cars that are now in our area, around our mosques, trying to enforce both American law and Sharia law on civilians in this. And at that meeting, Siraj Wahaj, who is the puppeteer of these cars, said, well, it's our goal to make sure that these Muslims live according to the Sharia, that is, Islamic law. Well, the other mosque leaders said, well, we're not going to have that in our neighborhood because this is a highly concentrated area of drug dealers and crack dealers and dens. And if your cars come into this area and gets these drug kingpins upset, it's going to cause a war, and they're going to start shooting at our mosque. And your cars probably aren't going to be around at that time, and we're going to have to go to war with these people. So get your cars out of our Crown Heights area and take them over to another area of Brooklyn and patrol that area. Well, because of that incident, the Muslim community patrol officers realized they were not capable of dealing with such confrontation. So they reached out to the 72nd Precinct of the New York Police Department and asked them if they would train their officers in both self-defense and suspect restraining techniques. And the NYPD 72nd said, yes, we will train your officers in how to apprehend suspects. So once again, we have an official government agency that is training what is clearly a religious police force, because they call themselves Muslim Community Patrol Officers, and how to enforce Sharia law on the citizens. And Kevin, you and I both know that would never happen if these people had been calling themselves the Christian Community Patrol Force, trying to enforce, Christians don't have exactly laws, but if they attempted to enforce any type of law that they said, well, you have to abide by, Christian principles, on the citizens, this would never happen. You would not have the NYPD training Christian patrol officers on how to restrain suspects.
Well, Martin, we could call it the Christian cops or the Ten Commandment cops. You'd have outrage from the media and everything else.
There would be, and this story would be a lot bigger than what it is, because I think most Americans are not even familiar that these patrol cars are running around New York City at this point. And look, the organizers of the Muslim Community Patrol and Services say that the Brooklyn area is just a test area, meaning they want to be able to work out all the problems before they take this into the broader reach of the Big Apple and also into other cities of the United States. So if we continue and want to ignore this situation where you have police official up to, almost 36 patrol cars running around the city enforcing Muslim law on citizens and Muslims, we want to ignore it. It's going to encourage them to get more of these cars and put them into other big cities.
It is. Now, Martin, if people want to take a look at your website and this story and more, what is it?
Well, it's ChristianAction.org. So if you log on, you'll see probably near the top, depending on what you're using to look at, but it should be near the top. You'll see a special report. You can click on it. It will give you immediately the 7 to 8 critical points that is inside of our report, but you can also download the report, which I think your readers will find very fascinating and interesting and also quite alarming.
Martin, we'd love to have you back. Thank you for your insight and your objective reporting. Take care, sir.
Thanks, Kevin. I appreciate it. Bye-bye now.
Bye-bye. Coming up next, more of your phone calls about the issues that matter to you. Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio.
Lynn Starkey filed her federal lawsuit Monday against the Catholic Archdiocese of Indianapolis and Roncalli High School, claiming she was fired because she's in a same-sex marriage. She's accusing the school of retaliating against her, subjecting her to a hostile work environment and discriminating against her on the basis of her sexual orientation. The Archdiocese issuing a statement saying Starkey knowingly violated her contract by entering into the marriage. Archbishop Charles Thompson has said the recent firings of gay teachers at 2 Catholic high schools were about upholding church teachings on marriage, not about sexual orientation. Lisa Lacera, Fox News.
There you have it. Now, this is going to be a challenge perhaps for some religious organizations, some Christian organizations. Do you rewrite Christian doctrine, Christian dogma, when it comes to same-sex marriage, when it comes to what is and what isn't acceptable of a person in that faith? Now, you look at the LDS Church, you look at the Catholic Church, you look at the Methodist Church, the Lutheran Church, they all have their ways of dealing with this. But if the Catholic Church or the Christian churches have people that are in a same-sex marriage teaching in a Catholic school, don't they have the right to say, I'm sorry, this does not fit our religious faith. This does not fit what we're trying to teach young people. I have been, people come up to me all the time and say the idea that religion, black and white, is going away, Kevin Miller. We're concerned. I understand that. But it comes down to love the sinner, hate the sin, that sort of thing. I believe we're going to see much more of this across the country. And a situation that the Supreme Court punted on many times, because you look at the First Amendment when it comes to faith, when it comes to practicing your faith. Religious organizations are tax exempt. Religious organizations have a right to determine who and what are a part of their employment. Now you have this same-sex couple that, again, like the bakers, the candlestick makers, the photographers, could go anywhere else. I admire anyone who teaches school, who educates their kids at home, whatever you want to call an educator. But when you think about this, and maybe this is happening in your own church silently, maybe this is happening somewhere where people don't want to talk about it because it's uncomfortable, right? It's uncomfortable, but if you are a practitioner of a faith And of course, the almighty Supreme Court hasn't determined this yet. But just like there are some things about other people's faith that I wouldn't follow, you wouldn't follow, so we're not a member of that select community. Now, can you practice your faith? I suppose you can. And people won't fire you for that. But if you, not fire you from the congregation, but if you are an employee of said group, and said group is a Christian-based group, and their belief is they don't back same-sex marriage, they have a right to terminate you. At least until the Supreme Court decides some other way. If the Supreme Court decides that religious groups don't have that right, then really, what's the point of having a faith-based curriculum, a faith-based group? Now you have people, again, looking at the courts to have over 2,000 years of Western civilization thrown out. That's the funny thing to me. And most people don't talk about the gender wars, and the media has so wrapped itself up in the LGBTQ ABCE community that if you even question it, you're labeled a bigot or an extremist or what have you. But to continually stand silent, isn't that consent? So when I always say, well, we've got to evolve our thinking, and I'm thinking, well, again, back to this 2,000 years of Western civilization, of Christian thought, of the Bible, we're going to say we know more than Jesus? We know more than the apostles? That's what always got to me. In professional life, and it took me a while to figure this out, when you're going, well, that person's wrong. Well, I don't know. I'm looking at their resume, and they're pretty good, and I'm looking at mine, and it doesn't add up, and they've got a lot more knowledge in this field, and I don't. So if I were looking at this thing, I'd say, I'd probably back them. Doesn't mean they're automatically right. But here you have the same-sex couple. One of them is teaching in a Catholic school. They violated the Catholic contract. Some organizations have morality clauses. In entertainment, if you're even accused of something, you can be fired without cause. It's what you do to live the life, to gain admission. Church should have a right to do that. 580-5436, 580-KIDO. Traffic and weather together. Kevin Miller in the morning. Good morning, Dave. Thank you, Larry Gebert. So that's really what it comes down to. But now you have people that have decided, and we talked about this earlier. If you missed it with Senator Crapo, we'll have that on the podcast coming up. But the inconsistencies of federal law, where you have marriage has been decided by the federal government, yet pot smoking hasn't. One, it's a states' rights issue, pot smoking. The other, marriage, is a federal law that is enforced by the federal government. The federal government decides. So when you take a look at your church, your school, and if you send your kid to a Christian school that does not acknowledge same-sex marriage, and you have people teaching that are a same-sex couple, well, it's going to make for an interesting parent-teacher conference thing, right? Whoever looks forward to those anyway, right? So you have the Catholic school in Indianapolis going, look, you're fired to these two. Well, it's discrimination. I believe, and maybe that one Supreme Court ruling when it comes to religion involving the baker in Colorado, that might be precedent. But if you're a religious group and you believe a certain way, the government can't force you to hire people that don't practice your faith. Because, again, you're not just an employee. There are additional demands. Now, maybe that's, you don't have to be practicing that faith to get employment, but they have the right as a private group to say, it's time to move on. But I predict won't only be the Catholic Church, but it will be churches across the country. As same-sex marriage becomes more prevalent, you're going to have to deal with these issues. No one likes to talk about it. No one wants to be uncomfortable. No one wants to be labeled a name because they are politely and respectfully disagreeing with what has been spoon-fed to us by the mainstream media, by the Democrats, by the libs, by everybody else. You can love whoever you want in America legally now. However, that doesn't mean that you can get employment with a place of faith. Does it? Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio, 107.5 FM, 580 AM. Your call's next. Good morning, Doug. Rolling on the right side when it comes to faith-based programs and who gets to work there. That's what we're discussing. Russell in Meridian. Good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio.
Good morning, Kevin. I appreciate this subject matter. It's right up my alley, and I'd like to say to everybody listening that there's been an element of the gospel that has been removed, and that is when Jesus Christ was crucified, he crucified the flesh. He was in a fleshly body, and he put the flesh sins of all mankind on his self, and then he executed it. The penalty was death. And that translated into a resurrection life for those who believe into him. And that means that they will live a life themselves in which they crucify the flesh on a daily basis in their mind and their soul. This has been removed from the gospel. The institutionalism of America and Christianity have softened the gospel so that it doesn't give the demands of the faith action of the individual. So the solution is not institutional Christianity, neither, some program. It is individual free Americans that can speak of the experience of what I just said, and then they can speak out as individuals, not a collective. You see, the churches, Kevin, they're under the design of the same collective institutions. It's not helping. It hasn't helped for decades. You can see for 60 years, the deeds of the flesh have reigned over our society, and the left-wing liberals and the purveyors, the flesh purveyors, have won. It's time for individual Christians to speak out in forums of the experience of the crucifixion of the flesh, where they overcame their sin patterns, they overcame their habits of sin as individual free Americans. And I think that's the need of the day. In fact, it may win the 2020 election if we have a lot of people speaking out like I just did.
Well, we love it when people speak out. We certainly love to hear what you have to say. Russell, thank you for the call and for bringing that to our attention here.
Thank you, Kevin. God bless you.
God bless you. Live to the White House. No, not a White House, the White House. That's where John Decker of Fox News Radio works. We'll hear what he has to say on KIDO Talk Radio. John, good morning.
Good morning. How are you doing today, Kevin?
Good to have you with us here. Just amazed at the president looking at the budget, looking at everything else, and now the Twitter war continues between himself and prominent Democrats.
Well, that's right. The president keeping up that attack on Elijah Cummings. Elijah Cummings is the chairman of the House Oversight Committee, and he is the person who is overseeing a number of investigations concerning the president and his administration. And he also is the congressman that represents large chunks of the city of Baltimore. So the president has criticized the fact that Baltimore really is in a city of decline over the past 20 years. I can tell you, having been up to Baltimore a number of times over the course of a year, that this city really, as Bernie Sanders speaks about it, he himself said that it's like a third world country, at least parts of it are. And so the president's comments seen by some as racist, but the president's also been very critical of Bill de Blasio, who is not African-American, but rather white, and he presides over the city of New York City. And the president has called Bill de Blasio the worst mayor in New York City history. So this is something, obviously, that the president obviously feels is something that it works for him in the long term as a net plus. There are those in the president's own party that say this is not good and takes away from, your legislative agenda.
It's fascinating when you, whether it's you see his written comments or the transcripts or hear him, the president earlier this morning saying, "Hey, Congressman Cummings, why don't you go oversight your congressional district?" It's something that earned the president obviously a place in the WWE Hall of Fame. It's just amazing. whether he can, and you've got this event in Georgetown today and people are going to boycott and everything else, he is bringing attention to this issue. Some folks might have a problem with how he's done it.
Well, that's right. The president is pointing out that Baltimore, its poverty rate is over 22%. That's nearly twice the national average. I can tell you from when just anecdotally, Baltimore is about 40 miles north of Washington, D.C. It's a city that has literally hundreds of abandoned buildings. And it's a city that, its crime rate is also very high. So, I think it's sort of low-hanging fruit for the president in criticizing Baltimore. As you know, Elijah Cummings has called the president a racist. The president has called Elijah Cummings a racist. And there's no sign that this feud between the two of them is going away. And the president did indicate today that he'd like to travel to Baltimore, but did not give a timetable as to when something like that would happen.
John Decker, we always appreciate you. Any predictions on the big debate tonight and tomorrow night?
No, I have no predictions, but I did ask the president a question in that regard before his departure on Marine One. I asked the president, A, if he's going to watch tonight and tomorrow, and B, I asked the president who he believes, if he has a sense, a gut, as to who he believes his opponent will be in 2020. And the president didn't even have to think long. He said, Sleepy Joe. So that's who the president is preparing for in terms of an opponent next year, the presidential election year.
John Decker, we appreciate your work. Thank you, sir.
Thanks a lot, Kevin. Have a great day.
You too. John Decker joining us, followed by Tea Party Robert on KIDO Talk Radio.
Good morning, Mr. Miller. How are you today? A little warm down there in the valley?
Well, it's always warm because we're rolling on the right side, and you?
Well, it's going to be a beautiful day up here today. I just have a few comments.
Well, tell me what it's like in January and February.
I don't intend to be here this January or February.
Sure.
I love you, brother. Let me tell you. Coming on San Francisco, Obama's appointed judge who wants to ban assault weapons. From September 94 through September 2004, the duration of the last assault weapons ban, there were 15 mass shootings over the 10-year period. Basically, this ban did nothing to curtail these types of shootings. The real underlying problem with mass shootings is one that nobody wants to address, and that is the problem of mental illness and psychotropic drugs. So let us go back to the basics and fix the problem at the root, because it is the people that kill people in mass shootings, not guns. We don't need to confiscate guns or restrict magazines. We need to take care of those who need psychiatric help instead of paying the medical bills of illegal aliens. The Democrats will not stop their assault on the Second Amendment rights until they confiscate all the guns. When that happens, our freedom that we have enjoyed for 243 years are going to disappear in a flash. And on Joe Biden coming here, as I have said many times before, our state is under attack by the left. Much of that offense is being perpetrated from within our higher educational institutions that we support as taxpayers in this state. The Democrats have been gaining ground in our state for the past 10 years. And if it continues at the current pace, we're going to see a turn in the next 10 to 15 years. The strongest bastion for conservatives in our state come from the rural areas, and they are dwindling in population year after year as they lose more and more jobs that used to be the mainstay of those towns. People seem to forget that far-left candidate Paulette Jordan got 38.2% of the vote in the last election. And I believe that Joe Biden's coming here is just another shot across the bow for the Republican Party of our state. As the song goes, the times they sure are changing. Biden coming here is just another way to rally the troops, the Democratic Party. And you can bet that they have an eye on taking over our state by continuing to populate areas like Treasure Valley with more registered Democrats, many of them coming from our own colleges and universities. And when the government starts sticking its nose in religious organizations of this country, telling them what they can and can't do, we do have a serious problem. This country was founded under the banner of Christianity by our forefathers, and this is one more assault on the basic fundamental rights we have under the Constitution. Religion used to be a hot button that no one wanted to touch, but less and less Americans are attending church on a regular basis, and religious freedoms have now become fair game for the far left. So our country is under siege by the far left, and every direction you can possibly name. And if we don't change it, we will not recognize America in the next 20 to 30 years.
Will you be meeting with Joe Biden?
Oh, gosh, no. I don't think I have time for him. Are you going to meet with him?
It does seem odd, of all the places in the world, and the idea that you have to, and by the way, if people don't know this, they're not even saying where Biden is hiding out at here. You have to pay $100 to find out where Sleepy Joe is going to be hiding. Now, if you want to go to the event, I believe it's $1,000. And then if you want your picture taken with Sleepy Joe, it's $2,500. For that, a lot less, you could fly to Iowa or New Hampshire and get it taken for free, or Nevada probably. But it's odd, of all the places in the world, Joe Biden would in fact be coming here. What does he know that we don't?
I keep telling you, this place is changing. And if we don't stop it soon,
well,
it's
you left. You left.
I mean, no,
you retreated.
Where the conservatives are, where there is a conservative
You
faction.
retreated and left me high and dry.
You drive through New Meadows, you are hard-pressed to find a house that doesn't have an American flag.
There's 500 people in New Meadows.
Yeah, I understand
on a
that.
good
That's
day.
what we have to change. We need to get another 2,000 here. We're moving up.
Not if I have to drive that 55. You can forget that.
Oh, that'll change too in time.
Psh, nope. I'm not down with that.
Well, I do miss you, buddy, but I'll be down, from time to time. Give you a hard time.
Sure. We'd love to have you. You take care.
You too, my friend. Have a good day.
All right. God bless Tea Party Bob. Doug from Mountain Home. It's been a while. Good morning. You're on KIDO Talk Radio.
Good morning, Kevin. Yeah, listening to Tea Party Bob. He's right. Everything he talks about, Kevin. They know what they're doing. They know these little states when you only got a couple electoral votes. And when they get an influx of what we're getting, I already been there, already seen it in Montana. Montana was a Republican state, an American state, I'm going to say. And it was all timber, livestock, the whole thing. Not no more. They have taken that over for over 10 years. And it's just a diversified bunch of people from all over the U.S. that has moved there because they're screaming and hollering. They want away from them cities. They want away from the trouble. And they come there, and the first thing they do is they start changing it. I mean, I seen it, Kevin, right there in Kalispell, Montana. And they get into the school systems. That's the very first things they do. They get into the school systems, they become principals, they become teachers, and they start teaching that stuff, and there you go. And Tea Party Bob hit it right on the head with these professors in our colleges and these teachers in the school. I'm seeing it right here in Mountain Home with the teachers in the school in Mountain Home teaching these kids liberal stuff.
They got libs in Mountain Home?
Oh, come on. They got liberals everywhere.
Just like the
gobs of them. Anyway, I mean, I don't know what to do with it. In our Republican Party, they have no cojones. They just sit there and hide. I mean, lie and hide just like the rest of them hide underneath it. I haven't seen them do nothing to help this guy. I mean, the ones that they just, they had a handful of them in Mueller's debacle they just had of Republicans. Kevin, could you imagine what this guy could be getting done for this country? Look what he has done on his own with a handful of people around him. Could you imagine what this country could be like if he had both sides wanting to do something for this country besides raping it?
Well, Doug, thank you for the call. You're listening to Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Thank you, Ray Amaya. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Well, Idaho, specifically pizza and pizza companies in our gem state are actually trending nationally. Let's take a listen here on KIDO Talk Radio.
A phone number from California called into the Flame and Cork restaurant where a man ordered 16 pizzas to go. Nobody ever showed up to pay the $375 bill and pick up the pies. The restaurant tried to call and text the number back and just got a message saying, "You've been dunked." Similar things happen at Capone's Pub and Grill and Radici's Italian Bistro. That's where $443 worth of expensive, large, gluten-free pizzas almost went to waste. The restaurant, posting on Facebook what happened, offered those pies for $5 each. Some customers bought them at full price, feeling bad for the business. Now the Kootenai County Sheriff's Office is investigating. We called the number on that Facebook post, but instead of speaking with a prankster, we just got an error message. John Saucier, Fox News.
Thank you, John Saucier. So that's in northern Idaho. So if you get a number and you're a pizza company and it's from California, get the credit card and run it before you buy the pizzas. Now, again, not all people from California, but man, you got pranked. Really, what people? Probably libs. Only a liberal would do that. Who comes up with these things? I'm going to call a pizza company. And by the way, you seen the markups on pizza? What does it cost to make a pizza? Like $1? It's $19.95. Brian in Nampa, good morning. You're on with Kevin Miller, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Brian.
Hey, Kevin, I think you should call him Creepy Joe.
Creepy Joe?
I'm just curious. I love how he's coming to Idaho, but you can't see him unless you pay him money. And I want to ask the people of Idaho, who's willing to pay to go see that guy? Are you going to bring your wife and your children? I wouldn't. There's no way in heck. And I'm sorry I got better things to waste my money on. And I also wanted to talk about Baltimore and how Trump's right.
Sure.
You know, we have a pretty predominant psychologist named Jordan Peterson that in his 12 Rules for Life, he says, basically, clean up your room before you go tell other people how to clean up theirs. You know, I think Trump nailed it. If a psychologist agrees with Trump that basically Baltimore's a mess and it needs to be cleaned up, that those people in charge, and I think there's been, 70 years of Democrats running that area, not one Republican, they need to go clean up their own house before they come and tell us how to run the bigger house. And that's just common sense. I mean, we don't go on the street and ask a bum, hey, how do I make money? You don't. You go help those people if you've been successful and you make money. And that's why Trump's not a racist. That's just a ploy of them to try to change the conversation. And they do that every time. Democrats have been trying to destroy this country for years and years and years and years. There might be some good Democratic people out there that don't. But the leadership, I can go back in history 100 years ago and tell you horror stories that Democratic leadership has done. I got one word for you, KKK. But that's all I got, Kevin. Creepy Joe. I don't want to see him.
Creepy Joe. How about a hug? Brian, thank you.
You bet.
All right, Brian and Nampa, appreciate that. Traffic and weather together. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio. Good morning, Dave. Kevin Miller in the morning, KIDO Talk Radio and the KIDO Talk Radio app. You go back to the move to decriminalize, and it's going to be a tough road for us. If you missed Senator Crapo earlier, you can catch his interview on our website. But, you have 33 states that have legalized recreational/medical marijuana. But out of 50 states, only 11 have legalized recreational marijuana. And what is it? The Chronic State. It's a movie that everybody should watch. I was talking to a friend of mine yesterday. He's going to have a showing at his house. Drug-Free Idaho's behind it. But, this idea that you can go to Ontario and smoke your things away and joke about it is just plain darn right disturbing. Now you have New York City, as we first told you. New York State decriminalizing marijuana became official. Under the new law, possessing less than an ounce of marijuana will carry a fine of just $50. 2 ounces, $300. That's the maximum fine. Well, what happens if you have more and more? And not one proponent, not one advocate of having that element move into Idaho has addressed the number one concern of most in law enforcement, most sane people, is kids. We have enough trouble with kids drinking. We have enough trouble with adults drinking and doing crazy things. To add that other element, well, they're doing it already. No, they're not. And then you throw in the idea of putting it in your food, that is crazy train written all over it. And we will do our very best to stop the insurgents before they cross the border here in our beloved Gem State. Ray Amaya, great job. Thank you, everyone who listens. We so appreciate you. God bless you and have a great day.